Yeah, no, it was awesome. I mean, honestly, like, told Shelby this, like, when we got back, like, it was such an awesome day. I mean, and I know it was long for our players because we were there 2 hours early, and as my staff likes to say, I was like the mayor of the building, just because when you spend time in the W, like you get to know everyone. It's just such a small league, and it's so interconnected. So for me, just catching up with GMs of both teams and different people. But I think from BG's perspective, there was just real emotion. I think she just was genuinely excited that we were there. So it was a really heartfelt situation. I think for our players, I'll use Belle as an example. I think I've talked about this before, but her first connection to Baylor was Brittany. She said she grew up like loving seeing her like at Baylor, and so I think for a lot of them they were real shy at first, but as soon as Sophia did a good job asking her a couple questions, and then I followed it up with a couple questions just to get her talking, and then before you knew it, they were really engaged with her. So really cool experience. Awesome to see Odyssey and Kalani. I mean, for it to be Odyssey's first game back, and not just that, how they impacted the game. They just weren't on the floor, but Kalani's first start, Odyssey's played really, really good minutes for them that night, and then since then. So to see, 3 former Baylor players play so well, I think as much as anything, it was good to see Brittany out there, to be honest, like from a real personal perspective, and having coached against her and getting to know her, like just really good to see her out there and be so effective. Like I think about, the 500 and some days that it was between games, and how seamlessly she's been able to go out there and be productive. I don't think she's moving quite as well as obviously she was, and I think that'll come back, strength and conditioning and all that, but it was pretty impressive.
Coach, you mentioned that moment and seeing the Baylor players play. You've had Baylor players come back. Obviously, it just stands out Dee coming back. What's that importance of kind of connecting the bridge between the past and the present?
Well, I just think, when you're talking about culture, your program, you want players that want to come back, that still feel connected to the program when they leave. It ties in a lot of ways, as lessons that we're trying to teach our players now about, you've got to help us recruit the future Bears. Like it's all kind of, when you think about when you leave and your legacy and what you want it to look like after, you should want it to not be about your 4 years. It should be about kind of forever, that once you're an alum of here and you've played here, that you still stay connected to the program and you want to see that program succeed. And oftentimes there are ways like that helps in recruiting, and you've had players that were successful. They've gone on to be successful, whether they're successful in the W or they're successful in whatever their career is after, that they stay connected and do bridge one generation to the next with the same idea that, when we had our alumni reunion our first year here, it was so cool to see the different kind of decades, the groups from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, be able to connect to people that graduated 2 and 3 years ago. So I think there's just unique ways because they all kind of went through the same thing, just at different times.
How's the current team gelling with so many new faces, and do you like where you're at from a depth perspective right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's so early. We've had 1 week of workouts. Do I like us on paper? Of course. Like, I think, if we can get people healthy, and keep them healthy, I think we have really, really good depth. One of our focuses this summer is, we have a set of core values, related to our culture, and maybe we've just decided that we're really going to focus on 1 a week over the course of the summer as it leads up to, us preparing to play in Italy and Greece and spend that time together. So we're being really intentional about how we go about these workouts and trying to get them to connect and communicate and compete and cooperate and so to really like kind of put these words and these core values into action. But I also think it's been a week, I mean, our everyone kind of reported by last weekend. So, they've had 3 workouts, 4 maybe now. And so mixing in individual group workouts, and really, I think the big thing for us is getting them to compete and grow over the course of the summer. But yeah, I mean, I really like our talent, but it takes time for, kind of all of that to work its way out. But I do think that the depth creates competition, and competition makes people hungry, and so you've got to be on it. If you don't show up, there might be someone that takes those minutes, where in the past, maybe you were able to be comfortable because we didn't have that same depth.
In terms of the 4 transfers that you added, was there one similar quality that you were looking for in a transfer that they brought in, or did they all kind of fill specific needs?
A little of both, but I can tell you that one of the key things was production. We wanted players who'd been productive, that whether they were productive in the MAC or productive in the Missouri Valley and the OVC, or where, but the idea that they had proven that they were really good college players, and it looks different with every player. Danae was someone that, even though she wasn't a high volume shooter or scorer, she hit big shots. She was fearless. I mean, she hit big shots against us, against Texas, and she brought a toughness and a little bit of a swag to her that we felt like we needed. So I think the combination of like productive, hungry, and tough. I mean, we use the word tough a lot. I mean, I think Dre and Asia bring that, but I think that's something that at times we felt like we could be better, first to the floor, things like that. And so I think, I love the idea that a Madison or a Yaya maybe didn't play in a Power 5 league, but they're out to prove that they deserve to and should have, maybe from the beginning, or that at least it was a good dress rehearsal. But there's a hunger in all of them to show they belong.
Coach, looked like you had some really good outside shooters, but was that a priority?
Always is, to me. I mean, I think it's spacing driven. It's not about leading the nation in threes made or taken, but it's about being able to stretch the floor and create driving lanes and post ups and cuts and allowing players to flourish. And I think when you think about how we like to play, we're not very effective if we can't keep great spacing. And so, I think that's the advantage that we have, I think, this year is with another year of growth from Kyla, with Dre, with Asia. We now have some post-up options, that we maybe didn't have this past year. And whether it's at the 3 or at the 4 or at the 5, to really take advantage of post-up options, you got to be able to space the floor. So you got to have people that can shoot. So I think it's that balance of inside, outside that was really important to us.
Coach, after you guys went to Arlington last week, read an article with Sports Illustrated saying that you want Griner's jersey retired when you guys open the new arena. Is there anything in the works now, or are there still boxes to check to get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's boxes to check relative to the process. I think, it's not that there's necessarily a formal, other than her having had her degree, which she has. I think it's about timing. It's about history. It's about the way things have been done here before, and making sure that I'm not going rogue and just running around telling people what I want to have happen, but that, it's kind of a push department-wide. But, from the day I was hired, I mean, Javon and I have had some of those conversations, in terms of, what it can look like. I've had conversations with BG's agent, and I think they're excited and open to the idea of what that could look like, and I think jerseys have always been honored here. And the unique thing about, I think college is it's truly hard to truly retire numbers because we had such a finite, limited number of numbers. There is a new rule this year. As your new chairperson, this has happened since the last time I talked to you, chairperson of the NCAA Rules Committee. But that our players will be able to wear 0 to 99, which gives them a lot more options that way. But yeah, I mean, I think it's about honoring her. It's about honoring her legacy. So however that looks, I just want to make it really, really special.
Speaking about the rules, what are your thoughts on the rules heading into the season with the block charge and the flopping?
Yeah. I'm not the spokesperson for the committee, but sitting in those meetings and having those conversations, I think it was consistent from coaches at all three divisions to administrators at all three divisions, that the flop situation was really, really important to people. So how we went about it, there are things the men like about what they do and things that they don't. So kind of creating our own pathway to feeling like we can have it called and at the same time not necessarily penalize people with a personal foul. I was worried it would be harder for officials to want to call if it was a technical but also a personal. We certainly want to keep our best players on the floor. And so, I think it's something that needs to be looked at on both sides of the ball. I mean, there's as much offensive flopping as there is defensive flopping. So, to me, rules are about making the game, I don't know, maybe people will argue with me. I like to say prettier. A lot of people don't like pretty basketball. Their goal is to muck things up. And I think I've always viewed basketball as how do we make it clean on offense and at the same time not take away defensive intensity and athleticism, things away. I think so few people understood the lower defensive box anyway. You probably could have pulled all the coaches across and not understood, did they start in the lower defensive box? So I think when you talk about block charge and eliminating the lower defensive box, I think that's important. I mean, do we want charges to happen under the rim? No. But we don't feel like we were effectively stopping collisions by creating that restricted area. I still think it's going to be because it'll be out there for the men. I still think it'll be a little bit of a mental, like, officials will be looking at it, but will allow players to rotate and still take charges. So I think they were doing it anyway. They were just always being called blocks. When they were there, they had position. They were there and established before someone gathered. So, I don't know that rule will affect the game as much as potentially the flops will.
Coach, in terms of adding a player like Danae from the transfer portal, is it a different kind of process when, Big 12 conference player? I know you have a good relationship with Bill and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't call him. I didn't ask his permission or anything. I think it's a different time. Like, I grew up at a time where you weren't allowed, to transfer within your league, and most leagues had that rule. But I think in the world we're in, he lost Aubrey Jones to Oklahoma a year ago. So I'm sure he'll change his play calls again this year because obviously Danae would know him. But I just think I look at everything as if one of our players had gone into the portal and that said player fit his system, I'm pretty sure there's no like bro code or sister code in this type situation. I mean, you recruit players that you think are going to make you a better program and fit. So I don't think any of it's easy. I don't. But I think I can say that there was no tampering and there was no, we weren't out to steal their players. But when kids go into the portal, you go after the players that fit, your needs. And she certainly does.
Kind of touched on it, but saying we're in a different world. I mean, just how wild has this offseason been, and just trying to get these rosters together right now?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I think it's different wild on the men's side. I think we'll probably be there soon. I think between the portal and NIL collectives and everything that we're dealing with, it's our jobs are different, and it's adapt and survive. I mean, I think I truthfully pray that there's a normalizing moment, where we feel like we've, is it when the extra COVID year disappears a year from now? Is it, because there are so many now 2-time transfers because they have the COVID year, and so now they can graduate, so they use the 1 time, then they use the grad transfer exception. So, I'll say it. I mean, I don't want to be the coach that does something any one way. It's not, I want to live in the portal and that's the only place we're going to be. Or, hey, we're only going to recruit high school kids. Like you have to see, you recruit the heck out of the high school players. And if you get ones that you really love, I mean, we were very intentional a year ago after we'd signed like Bella and Dariana that we weren't going to go after someone like them in the portal that would really maybe slow their process, their growth process. And, you know, maybe that wasn't the right thing short term, but I think it's the right thing long term. And I didn't get hired for a 1-year job. So I think we feel good that the progress they made and both being all freshmen, that it allows us to grow with them. But I still think it's hard not to add pieces that give you a chance to compete for a championship, you know, at the conference level, at the national level. You know, we still want to cut nets. And so you have to be able to adapt. And I think the toughest challenge with the portal is the speed, you know, and I also think that over time we're going to be recruiting players in the portal that we recruited in high school and didn't get for one reason or another, which will make that process easier for us. But I think right now you just kind of go in blind and you're trying to figure out really quickly, relationally, personally, all those things if they do fit, you know. And so that's the biggest challenge. Like most people know I don't do things quickly. And so even for me, it's you know, making quick decisions and who we want. And, you know, there's the part that, is it the kid that goes in first, or do you wait for someone better, or do you know, like it's, but if you snooze, you lose sometimes. And so there's a lot of that. Now the men, because of the NBA draft, that they almost have a first wave and a second wave. We really only have one wave, which is slightly better.
How have you grown as a coach since your first year in Waco?
Oh, that's really open-ended. You know, I think a lot of times you learn through failure. You learn what works in different places. You learn a little bit more about who you are in relation to where you're working and what works here that maybe didn't work somewhere else, or you figure out, you know, there are things at the pro level and ways to communicate that work that don't translate down. And so, you know, I think a lot of it is just trying to, for me, is learning to be a better leader. I think that coaching kids and athletes, that's not any different really. But, you know, managing 12, 13, 14 staff people, like that's a huge difference, you know? I mean, the pro level, I had my GM that I worked alongside, and I had 2 assistants, a part-time operations and a part-time video person, you know, and we were just kind of our own little, what it allowed me to do was be involved in business decision and corporate sponsor decisions, and, you know, was really utilized in a lot of areas. And so, you know, I got to touch a lot of things. But I think that part, learning to manage a bigger group of people, challenging a bigger group of people, like I think as a staff, you know, I think we've grown a lot in terms of how we communicate and what our expectations are and how to go about implementing them, because it just takes time as a group of people to understand, like, what's my niche, where can I be great, how can I help this program succeed at the highest level. And so I think that's still a process that's going on, but I would say that as much as anything, and just feeling really, really confident with, you know, the biggest challenge when I took the job was, like, I didn't know who any 2024 was, let alone any 2026, you know, and now ask me who the top 28s are, and I know, and it's in some ways sad that I know who the top 7th graders are, but I mean, that's just part of this world that we're in, you know, and it's so often your ability to build a relationship from a young age is the difference between who comes and who doesn't. You know, I still think the greatest selling point for a lot of the kids that we recruit is that I did coach in the pros. So not only relationally, but that our kids are going to be ready, you know, and we're going to sing and shout that because it's true, you know, and we're going to prepare them to be ready. But it doesn't mean we're not going to prepare people to be lawyers and doctors and whatever else they're interested in. But I do think that's a key piece, that people are going to be ready if they leave here and want to play.
Nicki, you mentioned staff. I know there's been a rule change about more coaches can now coach on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Sophia told me the other day how excited she was to be able to coach on the floor. Could you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, starting July 1, we'll have 6 countable coaches rather than 4. 4 still are only allowed to recruit, so those other 2 positions, it's almost like they've allowed that to some degree since COVID, to fill in, if you have a coach on the road or things like that. But it truly allows them to be integrated, whether it's scouting or player development, in-game coaching, things like that. So Aaron Sterniker, who does our video, as well as Sophia, will kind of move up into what they do / assistant coach, which I think is, both of them are people that have always wanted that opportunity. I think Sophia's process has been different, and I think she should speak to that. But I think for her, it's been a little bit about finding, like, what am I truly passionate about? I'm passionate about people, I'm passionate about ministry, but, like, how can I best translate that to, this profession and being a part of our program? And so I don't think there's any doubt that she's excited to kind of have the hands-on ability to work with players. And I've challenged her. Not every good player is a good coach, so there's still a lot of work to what it takes to be great at that, in terms of your preparation and what else is going on in the world and how kids are trained and how they expect to be trained. And when I was growing up, no one was throwing tennis balls at people while they were dribbling, and now you got cones and tennis balls and all kinds of things. And so it's a balance of training them to be comfortable with the ball, and at the same time training them to play 5-on-5. And I think that's sometimes the problem that we have, is too many kids are trained but don't know how to play 5-on-5. And so to me, it's the balancing the two.
How familiar are you with the new programs coming in, and are you looking forward to the 14-team format?
Does it matter if I'm not? I think, the beauty of 10 was that it was double round robin, and, you knew you were going to have kind of a true champion. I think anytime you get to an unbalanced schedule, which is every other league in the country, so it's not like it's not normal. But I think that's the unique challenge, is the imbalanced schedule. Obviously very aware of the 4 teams. I knew the coach that, retired a year ago at BYU, because he was coaching out there when I was in the Mountain West at Colorado State. So the new coach, just met her. She had coached AAU and had coached her daughter, and so had seen her but didn't know her. But obviously knows Satia really well, and Katrina Merriweather, going back to when her dad was a huge AAU influence with the family out of Indiana, and Katrina played at Cincinnati. And so, and then Huey, we played Houston a year ago in Cancun, and so very, very familiar with all 4 teams, less so maybe BYU. Haven't watched them as much recently. But a couple of years ago, even when I was in the W, we were all kind of following their really, really good team when they had Shaylee Gonzalez was there, and she looked like she was going to be a pro kind of coming up. So don't know stylistically as much how she plays, but we'll know very well by the time that we do play them.
Nicki, what's the benefit in your mind of the foreign tour? What's the plus side?
I think it's, I think from a, cliche-ish, preparing champions for life, like this idea of like truly integrating basketball with culture, and, this idea of, if our number one core value is connection, it's just another way to create connection. I do think it allows you a jump start in the summer, in terms of, we've got 5 new players, we've got 2, Asia, who played less than 100 minutes, Dre, who didn't ever play, obviously, last year. So, we've got all these 7 new players to really integrate with our 5 returners. So I think it gives us a jump start on kind of putting some stuff in. At the same time, like, there's a lot on these 18 to 22-year-olds now, and this idea of almost being a full year sport is sometimes a challenge. So I think there's going to be a balance with, hey, when we get back, are we going to take a little extra time off? The answer is yes, because I don't want them to feel like practice started in July and, you know, they're not going to have a break until April, you know, which is always going to be the goal, to play to April. And so I think we have to balance that, like the uniqueness of being allowed to prepare and go and have a good time with, like, not having them feel like it wasn't mid-September that we started practice, it was mid-July. So I think, I just think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think purposely we chose countries that are not only beautiful and culturally easy to move and shake in, but, like, to me it's like this becomes a little bit of a gateway to, like, feeling confident and comfortable with traveling, you know, if you've never been anywhere but Cancun or, you know, something like that. So, you know, I think that it'll be a unique, hopefully, experience for them to really see the world. And to me, like, I mean, it just, the world is so different than it was when I was their age. You know, when you were going overseas back then, you didn't have FaceTime, you didn't have Wi-Fi, for gosh sake. So, you know, you were really disconnected. Like, when you went over there, half the people that would go over there would spend their entire paychecks on long distance calls home, you know. So this idea of, like, it's different now. You can be over there and still be connected to family and friends. And so I think it makes long-term choosing to play a lot more viable for a lot more types of personalities.
Thanks, Nikki.
You're welcome.
Thank you.